Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hop-Ons podcast, a community review podcast sponsored by our Patreon supporters and any and every illness a human being can contract. My name is Colin Cox.
My name is Jonathan. Don't call me COVID Phelps. Colin?
Stomach virus in my house. COVID in John's house.
COVID in my domicile. Not my favorite. Not my favorite of the diseases that I have caught, Colin. I think there's some that I would prefer to this one.
Right.
If I could taste, I don't think I would mind COVID too much. I think that's the worst part about it.
Yeah, no, John, I can't speak for you, but as funny as it sounds, because I have diabetes, I often eat my feelings. So if I'm really sad, I eat ice cream, and then that becomes a disaster. So if I couldn't taste anything, then I couldn't eat my feelings, which would be very sad.
Yeah, I used to have to, Melanie was like, what do you want for dinner? I said, the saltiest things, because that's all I can taste, the salty things. So anyway, I'm happy to be here, Colin. What are we discussing?
Well, John, before we do anything else, two quick things. First, we have a new free patron.
New free patron.
So this is something we've mentioned over the last couple of weeks. Patreon now, you can basically subscribe to the podcast. You can become a patron without becoming a paid member. Now, just to be clear, you will not have access to any of our Patreon content. However, we will mention you here. Now, this was from a couple of months ago when we were on break, but we would like to welcome Lisa as one of our new free patrons.
Lisa Simpson. She's playing the saxophone. She gets kicked out of school.
I don't think we mentioned Lisa yet, so welcome, Lisa. If you want to become either a paid member and by doing so receive access to all of our Patreon content, or a free member, follow the Patreon link in the show notes. But John, second thing, I have a bone to pick. Some might even say I have a milk bone to pick with one pit bull. So I mentioned this to John.
It's going down. He's yelling, timber, Colin.
Fuck this asshole. So, John Phelps and I produce a free podcast. Occasionally, for funny satirical purposes, I will use music that I did not receive any legal permission to use. However, as I understand it, assuming I don't play, all of Yellow Brick Road, I can do this in small, contained ways for satirical purposes. I, funnily, in our first episode, attempted to misunderstand a request John made. So instead of, John, I don't even know which musician you wanted me to use, but instead I used a Pitbull song. Okay?
You know I wanted you to use Huey Lewis in the News back in time for Back to the Future. That's what I wanted.
Did. But instead I used a Pitbull song because it made me laugh. You used the
Pitbull song for Men in Black Part 3. And because of that, we got a copyright strike on, what, YouTube, Patreon?
On YouTube. On YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube.
YouTube said YouTube said that we cannot monetize, not that we would anyway. I don't know how to do that. We cannot monetize that episode because we used copyright material. But John, it's obvious I did it for satirical purposes. It's obvious you did not want me. I cannot think of a situation, even with COVID brain, where John would say, Colin, we need to find space for a Pitbull song. Fuck this guy. So here's what I want to do. Okay. I will occasionally cut. I don't know if I'll really do this or not. I'm just mad right now. But if I decide to do this in post, I will just cut to like 5 seconds of a Pitbull song. I want to see if these fuckers, I want to see how far Pitbull wants to take this. Okay? Because fuck this guy. I am very angry about this. I am very angry about this.
You really are.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. It's just Pitbull. Also, Milkbone to pick. He is a human, okay? He just says, anyway, fuck. Listen, This will go down in the annals of Hop-On's history as one of the more bad episodes because of me. I will say the COVID brain is doing a lot of not good things today.
Sure.
At one point, I literally was using the restroom and forgot that I was peeing. I just stood there for I don't know how long and sort of just stared at a wall and went, "Oh, okay. I have to be a human now."
You have the memento thing then.
I do. I have a memento thing. That's why I've been writing on my hands. I've just been writing, "Don't trust him," and it just points at you, Colin.
I really wish you were recording in a tank top so I could see all of your new tattoos.
Anyway, what are we talking about?
John, we are here to discuss Season 6, Episode 3 of Community, Basic Crisis Room Decorum. John, this episode originally aired on March the 24th, 2015. And I double-checked this. This is true. Directed by Bobcat Goldthwait. You know this guy, right?
I have a bit. Bit now, Colin.
Yeah, from the
Directed
band
by
show.
Bobcat Goldthwait, who is from a little program called Police Academy.
Sure, yeah.
And that led me down a path, Colin. I have a game for you. It involves one Steve Guttenberg, and it's called You Guten Be Kidding Me. Colin, I have 3 facts here. And of these 3 facts, sure, I want you to tell me true or false if these are about our friend Steve Guttenberg. Okay?
How is this relevant? Is this a COVID thing? How is this relevant to Bobcat Goldthwait? Because he's in
Police Academy.
Because Steve Guttenberg's in Police Academy. Sorry,
Steve Guttenberg's like, your handsome, charming lead of Police Academy.
He's
Bobcat Goldthwait was the crazy guy talk like this. That's Bobcat. Anyway, this is called You Guten Be Kidding Me, Colin. Yeah. I'm going to list these 3 things, and after I say each one, you tell me true or false.
True or false.
Is this something related to Steve Guttenberg? Here, number 1. Steve Guttenberg turned down the role of Peter Venkman to star in the Police Academy movies. True or false?
True.
That is true. Correct. Mm-hmm. Point for Colin. Number 2. Was briefly considered for the role of Indiana Jones before Harrison Ford. True or false?
True.
That's false, actually. And number 3. Steve Guttenberg has been in a movie with the My Pillow guy, Mike Lindell. True or false, Colin?
We had this problem with the last one. It sounds crazy enough to be true, but it's specific enough to be something that your COVID brain would produce. This is true.
This is true, Colin. He was in a movie called Roe v. Wade, Colin, where he played one of the Supreme Justices.
No,
Steve Guttenberg is a piece of shit. I just want to go ahead and put him on the piece of shit list, Colin. That is my You Guten Be Kidding Me. I will never bring that up again. That's all I have to say about Steve fucking Guttenberg.
I have one thought.
Yes.
Get in the kennel with fucking Pitbull. That's what I think.
Oh my God. Let me read some people in the movie Roe v. Wade, besides Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy.
Is this like a 2023 situation?
2021 movie.
Because he's been around that long. Fuck, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Joey Lawrence. Whoa. From Blossom. Remember him?
Yeah.
Jamie Kennedy. Do you remember Jamie Kennedy?
He was in Arrested Development, dude. He's
also apparently a big piece of shit. Also, Corbin Burnson of Major League fame.
No, that one makes sense to me. He's in. I think he's been in a lot of like bad conservative movies.
And of course, John Voight is in Roe v. Wade also.
Of course, yes. Is that guy still getting work? Is that guy still getting work? Like that guy's still getting legitimate work, right?
I don't think he's getting legitimate work. He is in the Roe v. Wade movie, so I don't know how legitimate that is.
We might need to watch that movie starring Henry Cavill, where he thinks he's a Mormon, like former FBI agent who stops sex trafficking. Do you know about this?
Do you mean Jim Caviezel?
I said Jim Caviezel.
You said Henry Caviezel. I think you're thinking of Henry Cavill, who is Superman. Jim Caviezel. Which one of us had COVID? Jim Caviezel.
I do this all.
Was Jesus Christ. Yes, you're talking of The Sound of Freedom. Colin. That's the
Sound of
film you're
Freedom.
speaking of.
Yeah, no, should we
I
do
feel like
a
I was talking
Patreon?
to my grandma there, trying to see what fucking movie are you talking about? It's the one with Henry Cavill, Jesus, and he's out there, he's shooting terrorists. I can't remember.
No, it's Jim Caviezel, not of Enola Holmes fame, Henry Caviezel. My apologies. Or
Correct.
Cavill, Henry Cavill, not Caviezel. Now I'm combining the two. This is a motley actor that I've made. But John, written by Monica Patrick. So 25 community credits as writer, staff writer, and story editor. So a significant figure for
All
the
right.
community writing team. John, this is your IMDb plot summary. The Greendale Gang goes on the offensive when a rival college releases an attack ad. John, maybe feels a bit like an adaptation of a bottle episode, because they are in it's not a proper bottle episode, let us be clear, but they are in a single location for a sizable amount of time. But John, from what you can recall of this episode, I would love to know what you think.
Well, I mean, I think when I watched it, it felt to me like perhaps the creators of this episode may have gotten some form of COVID back in 2016, whenever this aired,
Okay.
because this is the wildest. It's not a great episode. I did not particularly enjoy it. I mean, I wouldn't consider it to be like bad. I think it's fine. I think there are moments that are very funny that stand out as the show trying something different, especially now that I don't think they have the confines that they may have had when they were on NBC. There are some things that are vastly different. That Britta moment, that Britta bit is. Boy, oh boy. But there are some choices that are made in production that I think are strange. I'm not sure Bobcat Goldthwait is like the best of directors. He likes to do some very interesting things with the camera. He lets shots linger for a very long time to where it's uncomfortable. I think in sitcoms, this is not something you should do. I think cuts are there for a reason. They help emphasize comedy. The one that sticks out the most is the one on Keith David's character, who at one point they're like talking about the mailman was black, and then it cuts to him for his reaction, and it stays on him for what feels like 5, 6, 7, 8 seconds, and it's just really uncomfortable, and I'm not sure why it's there. And I think there's a lot of things like that in the production of this show that I question the choices that are being made. I think the Dean's really funny. I think the Dean steals this episode when they're talking about if the dog got a degree, and the Dean is doing his best to try to avoid answering the question. Jim Rash is doing a lot of very funny physical things. But yeah, overall, I mean, it's not my favorite episode. I don't think it's terrible, but I'd love to hear what you think about it.
I think it's an episode that improves the more you watch it, because the comedy is spectacular. This is a remarkably funny episode of television. I hadn't thought about the direction necessarily, but just because the number of times I've watched this episode, I haven't counted, but it's a lot. You're right. Goldthwait does linger, it seems, at moments. I can think early when I think maybe it's Frankie who says something like, "Did we really give a degree to a dog?" And then we just get this cut to Jim Rash, who says nothing, and he's just staring. And it's funny because it's obvious that he doesn't want to answer this question. But unlike in previous episodes where he may pretend that his phone is ringing, he just stares. And there are a lot of those moments after Elroy interrupts Britta. I think there's a beat there that might linger a moment longer when Elroy learns that Frankie never owned a TV. The camera just lingers on his face.
That's what I'm thinking about.
That's one of them too, right? Where it's clear that the camera wants to show us him processing something, but it's not something he wants to verbalize or vocalize. And so I think if you've watched Bobcat Goldthwait's comedy, you know that a lot of, his stand-up in particular, it really uses those kinds of awkward pauses and silences, and it really emphasizes awkwardness as something that seems to produce comedy. You can see that in the sensibilities here at times. Not that, because let's be frank, The Office uses quiet pauses to produce comedy. Arrested Development does too, but there's something about how it happens here that I think feels a little different. So I totally agree with you. But a lot of the verbal comedy I think is incredibly funny. I like the return of City College as a primary antagonist. I think if you are someone who wants seasons of Community to have some overarching narrative conceit, you might find this episode frustrating, because why has City College just now decided to redouble their efforts to defeat Greendale? Because we see and learn nothing about this prior to this episode. Again, this feels just like a conventional episode of a sitcom where we begin the episode with a problem and there's no precedent for that problem. It's just, here's a problem. So I like this episode, but I think this episode gives us a sense of how this season wants to think about the overarching narrative for this season, which is to say it doesn't really want to think about it at all. It's just one seemingly disconnected episode from the next, and while funny, is maybe a bit dissatisfying for some people.
I see. Is that a common complaint of season 6? Like,
from what I've heard,
what's the big overarching story here?
I think some people find it frustrating that, like, why would this need to be episode 3? This could be, maybe, aside from a couple of small things, like the idea that Elroy seems unfamiliar with some of the relational dynamics, there's no reason why this needs to be episode 3. And so I think for some people who like this show, that kind of, like, that way of thinking about sitcoms, well, maybe just this sitcom is a bit frustrating, because I don't think that's true of seasons 2 and 3, which seem to be some of the more popular seasons of the show. Everything has a natural, sequential, serialized order to it, but I don't think this does necessarily. So yeah.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you that this, there's a lot of things that it seems like it doesn't matter. When I was watching it, even I didn't feel the stakes at all. And I think I love how they're getting around budgetary constraints, because they're shooting this at quote unquote 3 a.m. because they just don't want to pay extras. You know, they don't want to pay other people to be there. So if we only have the study group here, we don't have to pay other people. And they even go so far as to make like a joke about it, where early on there's like the 2 extras that walk in and they say, you know, I doubt we even get a line out before, and then they get kicked out. So they're very aware of that, which I think's quite funny. Elroy's really great in this episode, trying to parse together all the things that have happened. I do have some problems still with the sound design. I think it's
really
jarring at some points. The Britta trying to fart, I guess, and then she shits herself. I'm just wondering if that there was supposed to be a sound there, or if Britta's just supposed to like hang out for a second, because it was very jarring how it was shot. There's the lack of music is something that was deafening to me. I think there's maybe music in the whole thing 3 times, it feels like, whereas in the NBC side you had those bumpers in, bumpers out, and you had, you know, transitions from like one place to another. You'd have music. Even with the bottle episode, you know, they would still transition to later in the episode. They would use some type of music as a segue to get you there. Here, there's like hardly any, and I found it to be jarring. So those are things I'm noticing. Again, that could be the COVID brain talking, but it is something that stands out to me.
Yeah, but I think something else worth considering, John. I don't think this is something, depending on how you watch these episodes. So, for example, I watch almost everything on Netflix, which means I don't see commercials. So all of that transitional music, which that has an obvious formal purpose. It's designed to move you into a commercial and then pull you back out of that commercial.
For sure. Yeah.
I would want to double check. John, I don't think they did that with Yahoo. I don't think the Yahoo screens.
Oh no, they don't. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I guess if you're conceptualizing this episode and then editing it, you're not thinking perhaps about editing with music, because if you're cutting, it's really just a hard cut from one act to the next. It's not a cut to commercials and then a return to the show. And so I wonder if this is one of those times where we're seeing the show adapting to a different form, something different from a network television aesthetic.
Yeah, and I mean, and I don't disagree with that, but I think in my brain I go to something like Arrested Development, where they would use music to do the same thing as a comedy beat, even at some points.
Totally.
You could still put it in underneath the episode, because when you don't, there for a majority of the episode, I feel like I'm watching a stage play, which is fine, but the context of the stage play happening is like the fucking most insane story. And so like I'm dragged between these two sort of worlds where I'm trying to suspend disbelief and also like at the same time feeling like I'm part of like this theater in the round watching the stage play. So the whole time it's like fucking jarring to me.
Yep.
Whereas it doesn't feel like a television show anymore. It's like crossed the line to be something vastly different. And I think it's totally because they don't have budget, or maybe they're rushing, I'm not sure. But then there are moments when they fully realize what they can do now. And I was watching it the second time around when they're in Elroy's RV, and the moment when Britta goes into her musical number, you can tell that they've planned it all out, and it's all done in one shot. It's great, where they're rolling back Keith David, and they're expanding out the set, and they're pulling all this stuff out. So like, and then there's music, and I'm like, okay, now I'm fully into a show. And then a hard cut back in this like perverse reality I'm in. I don't know. It's a very jarring sort of episode.
John, I totally agree with you. And again, I think that's one of those moments where even if you understand the production necessity of having music and sound like that in a sitcom, it's fascinating how even in an environment where you do not have commercials, you still want it as a way of structuring your experience. Even if like, I don't watch any of seasons 1, 2, and 3 with commercials, but it would feel incredibly strange to watch it without those beats. This is yet another one of those moments where we're really left to reckon with how form creates expectations, makes as an audience us feel comfortable, as you said, allows something that should feel like a sitcom because of this one absence to feel, as you said, more like a stage play, which I'm not sure that was necessarily their intention. I agree with you. This feels like an episode where they wanted to maybe save on the budget by, and we know this is the reasons why sitcoms would do bottle episodes, to save on budgets. It feels like by having it set at 3 a.m., as you said, they can save on the budget because they don't need a full host of extras. But again, this is just another one of those reminders that if you think you enjoy the content of something, you really enjoy the form of something. Because I think what you're describing is not a problem with the content of the episode, but with the form the content takes. And again, I think that's just endlessly fascinating to me. So fascinating, because I agree with you. There is something eerie about this episode. And I don't think it's because we know it's at night. I think you're right. It's because there is a dearth of sound at times. And that's bizarre.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's it's subconsciously, it's one of those things where like you might not know it, but your brain does. For me, it's like when I watch like a YouTube video, if it's just someone talking, if there's no background sound or no music underlying, I can't watch it. It is so uncomfortable to me, and I think as a viewer, as a listener, that is something that you want for comfort, and the show so far, every episode has had these moments that are just extraordinarily jarring. And the episode turns, it just keeps getting more surreal with every new episode. Like the story of this episode is something that could totally be in Community. I get it. They gave a degree to a dog.
It's perfect,
for sure.
Right? Yeah.
It's absolutely perfect.
Perfect, yeah.
But then there's this like other storyline where the dean has been texting who he thinks is Jeff, but it's really a Japanese kid, I think.
Yeah.
Who is just I guess, got his number from God knows where and is making fun of him.
Yeah.
And when those scenes are happening, like, everything shifts. The sound shifts, the way that the Dean is played shifts, and it just completely pulls you out of what's happening. Not that that's a bad thing. I think it's great, actually. I just think that maybe they don't fully understand what the fuck they're doing this season yet, what the show's going to be. So they're just throwing everything into a blender.
I mean, it does feel like that, but it also feels delightfully absurd, I suppose.
I agree with that, absolutely.
Because again, when I think about a figure like Bobcat Goldthwait, and one of the maybe descriptors I would associate with his comedy, and again, I'm thinking specifically his stand-up, it is a kind of absurdist. It's comedy that's meant to make you feel deeply uncomfortable. Because here's the interesting thing about how any form of entertainment works. There are a particular set of aesthetic expectations, like the use of sound in traditional sitcoms. And it's funny how we as the audience start to see and understand certain aesthetic fabrications as something natural. It just becomes natural, right? This is what's the natural thing for a tight five. And anytime someone deviates from that structure, that's when things start to feel unnatural or absurd. And I think that's part of how this episode feels at times. This I agree with you. This narrative about the college giving a dog a degree, can I think of anything more natural to this show? But the idea that the dean would have a prolonged text conversation with someone who he thinks is Jeff, but is actually a Japanese teenager who becomes, a gang leader at some point?
Yeah.
I mean, this is breaking those formal expectations, and I think that's part of perhaps what people find frustrating about this season is this odd combination of things that feel incredibly natural to this show, and then things that feel incredibly unnatural to this show. And maybe not necessarily unnatural to sitcoms. Like, you could imagine a sitcom having a plot where one of the characters thinks they're texting with another character, but they're really texting with a Japanese teenager. But that doesn't really feel like this show, I think, which is part of the problem.
And for sure. And the difference would be, like, if they did it like in the Big Bang Theory, they would never show on the other end who you've been texting with.
Oh, well, this happens so often in sitcoms, right? When you think you're talking to one person, but you're just talking to someone who we never see, right? Yeah.
Right. That was, I think that's fascinating that you said, that maybe that's off-putting to people that were fans of the show, because I think, to me, it's incredibly watchable. I want to know how fucking weird you can get with stuff. I keep going, and it reminds me of when we discovered that, what was that show? Mary Hartman. Mary Hartman, is that the name of that show?
Oh yeah, I still have those DVDs upstairs. Yeah.
What a fucking ride that is that we discovered this insane thing.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm for that. I like when shows sort of break those barriers and do things like that. Anyway, we should talk about the meat and potatoes of the show. I don't think there's a lot there, so maybe that's why
that's the Lynch of it all, man. I think like part of what we've subtly tried to argue so far with this season is to really understand season 6, you need to understand David Lynch a little bit.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's
Here's one thing
true.
I was thinking of. In Frasier, the use of Maris as a narrative component on the other end of a phone, but you never see her talking. Fantastic.
She's just Diane. That's just another Diane.
Yeah. And what's always funny, and I think sitcoms do this quite often, it's as the audience receiving partial bits of information and then having Niles narrate the context for us.
Yeah, and that's, that was Newhart's whole gig for a while. Have you ever seen Bob Newhart? It's so good when he would do like the guy calling about King Kong on the building, and that was like one of the funniest fucking things in the universe. I mean, it's just that's constantly not being able to receive that information makes things exponentially funnier. But here, we get to see, because the medium now is text. It's not voice, so we have to see the other side of it, and at the end of it, to know that the dean inadvertently turns a Japanese teenager into a leader of the Yakuza is like, That's fucking weird, man.
It's wild.
That's some weird shit.
It's so wild.
It's
The
fucking
idea
weird.
that the show jumps ahead that much, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, so John, we need to talk about, unfortunately, Ayn Rand, because at the beginning in the pre-credit sequence, I never want to talk about Ayn Rand.
You couldn't be kidding me. Sorry,
exactly.
I had to bring him up again.
We can put her in the kennel too, okay? She get your ass in there, Ayn Rand. So we see that Frankie. Now, again, we don't understand the context, but John, she's reading The Fountainhead.
Oh yeah, she is reading. I don't know this book. Is this the book that all like the new MAGA people read? Is this the book that they're reading, or is that Atlas Shrugged?
So
it's that
okay,
one, right?
Well, it gets tricky, John, because I don't necessarily know if I would say Ayn Rand and her objectivist philosophy is necessarily consistent with MAGA, because now to be clear, I think she is someone who a lot of the conservatives who were opponents to figures like Barack Obama, I think they very much saw. I mean, there are these stories that like Paul Ryan would give his interns copies of Atlas Shrugged. And so Ayn Rand's objectivist philosophy is one that embraces a kind of radical self-interest. But I think we could use that at times to understand Frankie and Jeff's position, because one of the things that this episode wants to understand is the difference, it seems, between truth and honesty. Ayn Rand had some thoughts about truth and honesty, which I won't describe here, but this is from a book by someone named Tara Smith called Ayn Rand's Normative Ethics. She writes, she advocates honestly for its service, and here she means, I believe, honesty, for honesty's service to the agent's self-interest. Most people would recoil at this, assuming that egoism frequently dictates dishonesty. And I think her point is, for someone like Ayn Rand, she embraces a kind of radical honesty because that, at least according to Smith, is the most expedient way to manifest your self-interest. But what I think you see quite often in this episode, whether it's with figures like Jeff or figures like Frankie, it's really being honest but with an asterisk beside it, or narrativizing their understanding of honesty as a way of manifesting a kind of self-interest. And what I mean by that is, for example, when Jeff at the end, and we're jumping to the end here, when Annie thinks they did the right thing, right? They were being honest, even if it wasn't truthful. Jeff said, well, actually, no, we made the pragmatic decision by getting ahead of a negative story. He's framing that as he's framing that as a decision influenced by self-interest and not by a desire to be honest or tell the truth. And it just seems like one of those moments where it's almost impossible to be honest when self-interest is the thing that drives you, because you'll always find ways to massage whatever the truth is in an attempt to maximize your whatever outcome is best for your self-interest. I don't know. It's interesting how Ayn Rand seems to emerge at times in this episode. And even if there isn't some lengthy exploration of her philosophy, just this way that self-interest in relation to what should be the right thing feels like it's in conflict with different characters.
Gee, holy fucking shit, man!
I don't know if that made any sense.
Even if I
didn't
have COVID brain, this would be a whole.
Sorry,
fucking
I don't
lot
know if
for
that
me to
made
take
sense
in.
or not. It's just
No,
something
it
I
does
was
make
thinking
sense.
about.
It does. As you were saying, the idea of self-interest over honesty, and I was thinking about the Republican Party and thinking, yeah, dude, I get it now. I understand why they read that fucking book. That makes sense. Yeah, here's what I think fascinating about that. I don't disagree with the idea that Jeff is acting in what he thinks is like the Letterman approach, quote unquote. Which, for those of you that were that are not taking back meta, so you might not know what this is. The Letterman thing is while Letterman was accused of not accused, he's going to be blackmailed for having an affair. In his office, and so he went onto his show, which at the time was maybe number 2 to Leno. Oh, how you doing? And
I mean, it may have been number 1 at that point, because maybe this
Yeah.
was in the wake of like the Jay Leno, Conan O'Brien.
the Leno Conan thing, and he went on the
Yeah.
show and said, I had an affair with this woman, and I'm not going to pay her anything. And so that was looked at as this like real ballsy move, when no one really took a step back and said, you had an affair. Maybe that's, if your relationship was open, that's one thing, but you're coming, you're doing this so that you're not having to pay a bunch of money to people. It's the Hamilton problem. Hamilton did this same shit, and people, laud him as a hero, and he just did this in his own self-interest. And with Jeff, I think it's twofold. I think I think the case is that, it is his own self-interest to keep Greendale afloat, but at the same time, like, secretly, maybe not so secretly, they are very concerned about Annie. And I think we're not in the room when this happens. We don't get to see how this comes about. But I would imagine that Jeff and Abed have the aha moment together and come to the agreement of making this video to get ahead of the problem. That's how Jeff sees it. Abed sees it as, and also we can get Annie back sort of situation. So I think there's like a two-pronged effect with doing this.
Yeah, and that's, again, what's interesting, because what's the self-interested move here? What's the thing, what's the decision that would maximize an outcome that is in their collective self-interest? I guess killing the commercial on a technicality could you argue that would maximize a conclusion that would enhance their self-interest? Because I don't think it would. I think you're right. I think what's interesting about, as you said, the Letterman effect is how people ignored the fact that he didn't do this because he was compelled to be honest. He did it because it was the best decision for him to make, given the particular circumstances of this situation.
Correct.
And
right.
so here, again, honesty is not the driving imperative. It is really just self-interest that seems to drive this, because even the way they frame it in the commercial, they admit to what they did, but they also use it as an opportunity to argue that Greendale is a place where if one works hard, one is rewarded for one's hard work. It really, like, this is part of what I find, and Annie's, it's funny how she just accepts this without really reckoning with the reason why they did this. Because they didn't just create a commercial, John, where they said, we basically gave a degree to a dog. We need to do better.
Right.
There's that pivot, right? Which that's the rhetorical pivot where you then explain why this is not really a bad thing. This demonstrates our virtue as a place, that we reward hard work, which also implies that at places like City College, one is not rewarded for one's hard work. I just think it's interesting that Annie seems to ignore all of the implications here. And she's satisfied that they did the honest thing, which is not really the truthful thing, and that's all that matters to her.
I find the ad to be like exceptionally predatory, honestly.
The second one or the first one?
The second one. The one that airs.
Okay.
So,
cool.
We, and this is just something that came to mind, and I think it's a good comparison. We have a weird problem with our basement right now. Every time we do laundry, it floods our back room where our toilet is. So we can't do laundry right now. So yesterday I had to like wear a KN95 mask and go to a laundromat and sit there for like 5 hours and do laundry.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And this is like a laundromat where it's like, it's in a very sort of low income area of town. And right when I walked in, next to the change machine, somebody had taped a National Guard thing up. It's like join the National Guard.
Yeah.
Here, get your money for school, get this much money a month, and I'm like, you're immediately trying to take advantage of people who are super low income because that's just how America is. And so when I was watching the video, there's a moment, you don't get to see it, but you see Annie's reaction to the video and she's all happy. But at the end, if you are listening, the announcer says, Greendale, you're already accepted. And so
Yeah.
that is like thinking, if I'm like an aspiring student and I'm wanting to go get my degree and I don't have any money, I'm definitely not going to want to go to Greendale because they gave a degree to a dog. I'm going to want to go to the college where I think it's going to go farther and take me farther places. And so I think that it's like such a subtle little hint for them to try to like plant in people's minds, just like that National Guard paper I saw at the laundromat. I think it seems weirdly predatory to me for some reason.
Yeah, that is their slogan, though, right? You're already accepted.
It's just
So
it's
are
just
you
weird to
thinking?
say it after they said we gave a degree to a dog. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. So are we thinking? Is this good for Greendale or good for City College that they said that?
I think it's good for Greendale. Because
Yeah.
I think people that might not have, and again, I'm talking right out of my ass. Blame this on COVID. People that might not have like the confidence that they think to get into a school now can go, oh well, a dog
yeah.
got in, so
I can get in
surely
there.
I can get in.
Now I understand. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, John. Yeah, that's part of what I mean is for all of this talk about, and goodness, go to YouTube right now. I keep seeing this. Boy, YouTube really thinks that I might vote for Nikki Haley. Not happening.
Oh, me
kids.
too. Same thing.
Yeah, have you? Yeah, put her in the kennel as well. You can sit on Ayn Rand's lap and listen to Pitbull. Fuck you. Yeah, no. Because it's doing this thing where it's like, we know you love Trump, but he doesn't poll well against Biden. You know who does? One Nikki Haley.
Yeah.
Vote for Nikki Haley. And I'm thinking, this is not, I mean, like that's how these initial, that's the rhetoric and the narrative form of these initial ads, right? These kinds of political ads that you see on YouTube. The third one, the one that airs, you're right. The cinematography, the sound, none of it feels predatory, but you could almost argue in its lack of predatory aesthetics, it's potentially more predatory, right? Because here's the thing. When you think you're not behaving in an ideological way, that's when you are behaving the most ideologically, because you're doing it reflexively without thinking. It's this idea like the moment when you think you're out is the moment when you're the most in. The moment when you think you're outside of ideology is when you are being the most ideological. That's fascinating, John. I totally agree with you. You could argue the third ad, despite what they want us to think, is more predatory than the other two. Because at least you know what the other two are, right? Like you watch those ads, and again, you'll probably have the same reaction I have to those Nikki Haley, those Nikki Haley spots, and I think this is not working. This is not citations needed, my dude. Yeah. No, I know. That's a great point, John. I hadn't thought about that.
Steve Holt is a bastard. That's all I think about every time I see one of those.
No, it is wonderful that he even says at one point, right, Steve Holt is a bastard. He doesn't even know who his father is, which is what it means to be a bastard. And also his father is the person who made the video. Yeah, I know.
Oh my God.
Do you have any thoughts about what appears to be Jeff's regression in this episode? Annie says this early that Jeff, he's becoming or regressing back to this figure he was maybe prior to the beginning of the show, this slimy, sleazy lawyer who seems to care more about the technicalities of the truth than, as Annie might say, what is honest. So maybe there's this distinction between what is literally and objectively true, which we can discuss whether that's even obtainable, and the spirit of truth, which one, maybe we can argue that's what honesty means here. Honesty is the spirit of something. Truth is what actually happened, or honesty is what you think happened. Truth is what actually happened.
I mean,
do you have any thoughts about
the
Jeff's
canon
regression?
of the show, Jeff literally, this is a class that he teaches. So, like, he is going to be good at this, you know? He literally got a job teaching people how to lie. I mean, he's like, you know, he's a lawyer. If you go to a lawyer who hasn't practiced in a while and still, like, and give them a problem, you know, they're going to try to solve it in the most lawyer way possible. And so I don't think this is regression. I think you've just hit the right notes for Jeff to want to come alive again and be this sort of lawyer character. That's how I saw it, at least.
Yeah, and again, I think I would almost want to challenge Annie's framing of this, because I think she wants to think of this as Jeff asking the kinds of questions that nefarious lawyers ask. I think he's asking the kinds of questions that good philosophers ask, which is this ad truthful? Does it actually tell the truth? And while I think Frankie has this wonderful line, our plan is to attack the dog, right? Like, that into itself is really quite funny. But even though it is a technicality, the ad is technically wrong. They didn't give a degree to a dog. And again, I think here Annie's right that in spirit the dog earned a degree, even if the dog didn't get a degree. But yeah, I would almost want to challenge Annie's framing of this, because I think Jeff's asking the right kinds of questions, which is, do we know this is true? What are their citations? Did we give a degree to a dog? How did the dog, did the dog meet all of the requirements necessary for one to earn a degree? I think Jeff's just asking the right kinds of questions, and it's interesting how it's Annie's framing that makes him seem more nefarious than maybe he is.
The question that I have is, how did a dog take out library books? Okay?
I know.
I could see, now here's what I could see. I can see a dog showing up during admission, and some, like, stoner kid is doing the admissions, and they're just stamping people through. And they're like, I don't give a fuck. You know, come on
Or
in.
Chang.
I mean, we acknowledge that for some reason Chang's new thing now is, I'm the dumbest person that has ever existed. That's Chang's new character. Chang is just, I'm the fucking dumbest person here. So my question is, the dog gets in. I can accept that. The dog then has to realize that he has classes that are based on attendance. So now a dog has to understand when he has to be at school. Maybe somebody took him. I don't know. I'm not Ruffles. I can't live Ruffles' life. Here's the thing. How did the dog take out the library books is what I'd like to know. The dog would have to know which, the number one, a dog, obviously I would not think a dog could read. I don't know. I have 2 dogs. They're quite dumb. They spend most of the time licking their own buttholes, so I don't imagine that dogs can read books. That means they have to go in and find them via a card catalog. They don't have thumbs, number one. Then they're going to have to pull them out of the shelf, Colin, check them out. That's what I'm saying. We need really the true fucking evil in this. The phantom menace of this whole thing is the librarian at Greendale Community College. That's where your real evil lies. That's where the mole for City College is, Colin. It's the librarian.
Yeah, I think that's fair. This must be a situation where the person who keeps them, houses them, feeds them, they must do all of this just for a goof, right? That's the only possible explanation, right?
No, I know. I just liked I just liked mine a lot better. But no, you're right.
I mean, it is this interesting, because John, I'm just thinking about the history of film. I mean, Lassie was a popular TV show about a dog that seems far more capable than dogs are. But in the 90s in particular, there was a lot of like live action movies about dogs that could do like quantum mechanics and everything, and they just did it to get home and shit.
I don't know if there was that. I mean, Air Bud was a thing, but there's just a dog who could play basketball good. I don't know if there's one that did quantum mechanics.
Well, no, it's just like they play basketball, they play baseball, they find their friends and know how to return home, you know?
Homeward Bound. That's something a dog could do. Dogs can smell for 2 miles, Colin. Yes, a dog could come back home. I don't think a dog could get out there and fucking jam with Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen.
I thought they were farther than 2 miles in Homeward.
They are, but they have a nose. They can smell stuff. They have memories.
So wait, I just want to make sure. So you said they can smell for 2 miles. And I said, weren't they farther? And you said they can smell stuff.
No, what I'm saying is a dog could probably find its way home. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, that's our position.
I'm saying a dog can't play fucking basketball. Let's just go with that one.
So, Homeward Bound, documentary, Air Bud, fantasy.
Is Homeward Bound based on like a real story? I feel like it is.
It's probably based on a story that's what you described, which is a dog was like 1.5 miles away from home, and then the dog found its way home, and some asshole wrote a story about it.
And they made a lot of Disney money.
I'm very angry tonight. You know, here's
it's
the
all
crazy
because of
thing.
Pitbull, honestly.
The idea that a Pitbull could become a rapper, now I reject that premise entirely.
Anyway, hey everybody, welcome to the Hop-Ons podcast. My name is John.
Hey, I may have incorporated some of that music right now in that awkward Goldwaithian pause. So we'll see. No, we should talk about
Harold Pinter of our times. We should what?
Yeah, we should talk about Chang. So his dude,
yes,
his small inclusion in this episode. We don't see it, thank God. But conceptually, it's one of the weirdest, funniest things I've ever heard. So he thinks we should also, so instead of combating our negative publicity, we should just create additional negative publicity for our opponents. This feels very Trumpian, by the way. It's just distract from the bad things I've done by emphasizing the perceived, or in some cases, fictional bad things that my opponents have done. And John, his plan is simple. Shoot a porno on the City College campus, disseminate it, and then no one will want to go. He says something interesting, which is no parent will send their child. Parents don't send their children to college. Students choose where they go to college. I understand that parents might have an influence, but this idea that like it's a parent sending a child to college like I would send my son to daycare. That's not how, but the point is Chang shoots a porno
with himself
exclusively, apparently.
He shoots a porno of it, and I assume it's just him rubbing one out, I would imagine. I would think it is. I don't know.
It has to just be him masturbating, right?
But it's wild that he's so dumb. Okay. Do you remember when Chang was like a professor at the college?
Sort of, yeah.
I mean, a lot of it was fake, sure. But there's an episode early on where he's like talking about his wife, and you could tell that he like has a brain and a heart and a soul. Now he's just dumb. And I guess this is like post Hangover, so they're trying to get that audience maybe to watch Community. So they're having Ken Jeong do like Hangover type antics, maybe. I don't know, but that's the Chang story in this.
I think it's they seem to always explain Chang's de-evolution by suggesting that he has some kind of undocumented like monkey virus thing from his time in the vents. That's always the explanation, is the vents made him crazy and stupid, I guess.
All right. I'll buy it. Why not?
But John, he shoots a porno. John, he shoots a porno.
Yeah, he does. He shoots, but apparently it looks good too because Abed asked what kind of lens he uses. So
Abed thinks it's great. Yeah.
it's a good looking porno. I've never seen a cinematic porno unless you count the Paul Verhoeven masterpiece that is Showgirls. I've never watched a cinematic one. Are we going to watch Showgirls on the channel? I know we talked about it at one
We
point.
We can. Monsters Ball. That's pretty gross.
Colin. Oh, Colin.
You remember that?
Colin. I have so many bad fucking memories about that movie.
Yeah, we all do.
Do you remember this film? Do people? Let's. Monsters Ball when it came out was like it's going to change the fucking landscape.
Yeah.
This film is. Halle Berry won a fucking Oscar for this movie.
She did the thing that actors like Charlize Theron did, where she's not spectacularly gorgeous. I think the idea is because she's not spectacularly gorgeous, she's unattractive, which is why she wins an Oscar. That's the kind of like, I don't know, non-narrative conceit for her with this movie.
Yeah, she showed her breasts too, which the Academy seems to just go fucking nuts over. There was that moment when Seth MacFarlane hosted the Oscars and he wrote a whole song called You Showed Your Boobs, and people were like really offended by it, and they didn't realize the satirical nature of the Academy seems to give awards to women who like to get naked. That's what he was trying to say.
Yeah.
People. Anyway, Monsters Ball is a fucking awful movie that should not have been made. This movie sucks so hard.
I would need to go back and rewatch it.
It's got Puff Daddy in it. Diddy's in it, dude.
Oh, is Diddy in it?
He's her husband.
Is Heath Ledger in it too?
Heath Ledger?
Yeah,
I don't think Billy Bob Thornton is. I don't know if Heath Ledger is.
Heath Ledger. Yeah, I think Heath Ledger's in it.
Oh, he is in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Billy Bob Thornton's the executioner who kills her husband. Spoiler alert.
Oh, that's right. No, John, it's a weird movie. It's one of those like early aughts. Oh God. It's one of those like early aughts like focus feature, movies. It has that focus feature vibe to it. Like it's like in the same way that like Miramax in the 90s tried to convince you that they weren't a major Hollywood studio by making movies that looked independent even though they were not. That's exactly what Monsters Ball feels like.
It reminds me of when Shakespeare in Love won Best Picture and everybody is pretty sure Nicholson read the thing wrong. It wasn't supposed to be Shakespeare in Love. Anyway, we've lost the fucking point. We lost it a long time
I don't think I
ago.
do that. I know there was a controversy. Wasn't there a controversy with a movie like it's not Moonlight, but the movie where
Moonlight won, but they announced something else instead. I can't remember.
Wasn't it the movie where like white people do jazz or something? La La Land.
That sounds like what a fucking great review for La La Land. It's just a fucking an angry 40-year-old white people do fucking jazz. Who cares?
Well, speaking of music, we need to say a little something about Britta and Elroy, and I mentioned this in our last episode.
Yes.
This
Yes.
band, Natalie is Freezing. We hear a little bit of the song. I promise, John, they will return. This is not the only time we hear both of and this isn't the only time Natalie is Freezing has a presence in this show. Completely fictional band, completely fictional music. But I want this band to exist. I guess they kind of do, like the Cranberries, I guess basically Natalie is Freezing. Fantastic.
Oh yeah. I love them. Love that song. Is that her singing? Is that Britta singing like the actual singer? I wonder. I wish I looked that up.
I can tell you this. I hope I get this right. We actually meet the band, and I think it's Lisa Loeb who plays the lead
Oh
singer.
yeah,
Is that right?
I love Lisa
Loeb? Is
Loeb.
that Lisa
Yeah,
Loeb?
Lisa Loeb.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's
Yeah,
her. I think that's her.
cool. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
great. I love that moment. That's a really that's my favorite moment in the episode.
it's great.
It's so good. They do such a good job at making like a 1990 late 90s music video. She looks like Claire Danes in Romeo and Juliet. That's what I
Oh
thought
God,
when I
she
saw it.
does, doesn't she? Holy
Yeah,
shit! Yes, she
that's what I thought. I
does.
was like, oh, they're ripping that. It's almost like a Cardigans thing, or love me,
Cardigans.
love me.
Yeah.
It's like that. The thing. That's what I
Oh,
thought. I was
John,
like, oh,
that's
this is great.
perfect.
Love it.
That's
Love it.
perfect. Yeah. But she does make this interesting point about how she hopes it's true because that would mean she's no
Yeah.
more or less of a joke than anything else. And I think this is, again, returning to this interesting philosophical point that you and I have discussed repeatedly about this show, that Greendale is a place for losers, but far too many of them, Jeff in particular, refuses to accept this point or learns this point but then needs to relearn it. I think this is an important scene because it does ground this episode in what I would argue is a larger point the show wants to make, which is Greendale is a place for losers, which, again, if you're listening to us for the first time, we don't say that in a derogatory way. That's
No, yeah,
deeply
no.
affirmative for us. The idea
Yeah.
that you form communities around lack, not around something positive that everyone shares. You form communities around this collective idea that we're all just, broken, fractured, messy, lacking losers. And I think this sequence in particular just reaffirms that for us. And almost, I would argue, John, wants us or positions us to then champion a truth where Ruffles actually did earn a degree. Like, I think we almost want to then hope that, yeah, I hope they gave that fucking dog a degree because that would make this even better.
Yeah, and I mean, I think at the end of the day, like, she is Britta's right. Like, Britta is the only. It's interesting because we talked about, like, why would Jeff do this ad and why would Annie want this ad,
Mm-hmm.
And in reality, like, the whole ad should have been that line by Britta. That's how you get somebody to go to college. So I don't feel I want everybody to not feel like a fucking joke like I do. Like, I want,
Fantastic.
if I'm gonna be a joke, we all should be a joke together, sort of thing. I think that's gets somebody in the door. That's what people want to hear.
And John, that's fantastic because the point is we are all a joke. Always.
Yeah.
Always. Like,
It's a
anytime
sense
that we
of
think
community.
Yeah, and it's great because Jeff always has these moments when he thinks he's not, and we're like, those episodes almost always then reveal just how much of a joke Jeff is, in fact. The moments when he thinks he's not a joke are maybe the moments when he is the most a joke. Fascinating.
Yeah, and I mean, I would argue that's his episode. Like, he never once and stops and, like, takes into account that I'm arguing right now against that we gave a fucking dog a degree. Like, how dumb is this?
I think,
If he just
Frankie
realized that, he would say, "Oh, okay, we are a joke. We're fucking losers."
I mean, Frankie even voices this at one point, does she not? When she says, "Wait, our plan is to attack the dog."
Yeah,
right?
of course. Yeah.
Yeah. But what's interesting is there is this moment when, because I think Jeff follows this moment that I'm describing with allegedly this conversation is privileged. The point seems to be, I know I'm a joke and I know we're a joke, but we can, retain some dignity by not acknowledging that we're a joke. And what I like about Britta is her willingness to acknowledge what I think is a foundational truth for this place, which is, no, guys, we're all a joke. And that's the point, is we should just affirm it instead of trying to pretend that we're not. But Jeff is always attempting to masquerade that he's not in fact a joke, or that he's here under maybe a different set of circumstances or something. I don't know. But Jeff is always framing himself as someone different, even though, as you said, I think you're absolutely right. He he isn't. He isn't under any circumstances. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't have much else to say. I think we talked a lot more about this episode than I thought we would. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Wow. There
Well,
we go.
I think we've talked about everything. I think I know what you would say about the difference between truth and honesty. I don't know if we need to discuss that because I guess depending on the circumstance, maybe the truth is obtainable, but if we think of honesty as just one's understanding of what is true, I think, yeah, I don't want to be a relativist about this and just argue that the truth is always relative, and because then, like, what am I doing? At that point, like, I could justify a Jan 6 or something, right? It's, well, we thought this is what happened. So I don't want to go there. But I do think Annie's point about, well, what's the spirit of the truth? I think that's maybe what this episode wants to advocate is the spirit of the truth matters more than maybe the actual truth at times, which doesn't this sound like Dark Knight adjacent or something, that like people deserve something better than the truth at times. They deserve a good narrative, which I guess at that point I'm not sure because I don't like that idea.
No,
I'm very
I think,
confused.
Again, yeah, I think for me it would be like I think in this situation they really should have like just listened to Britta. Like they should have just Britted the whole thing, and
Oh yeah.
it's not like the truth would set them free necessarily, but I think the truth would get them the end game of what they wanted. You know, that's what I think.
Yeah. No, I think that's great because, and I wrote this in our notes, truth is often an elusive concept, but how we respond to truth perhaps matters more, which is to say the like honest narratives we choose to construct. Yeah, I think that's, and I think is Britta's truth more accurate than the actual truth? Well, not really, but I think her moment of honesty, her honest interpretation is a far better articulation of the truth than whatever the truth is. Yeah, John, beautifully said. They should have just Britted it. Yeah.
Look at me.
Well
even
done.
with COVID. Even with COVID.
Hey, this is like Jordan's flu game. That's what we have here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's me. I'm the Airbud of the Chicago Bulls.
You brought it back. John, let us transition to some of our segments. John, who makes your Dean's List? Who is your best performance?
Oh, wow. You know, I probably would have... I think I'll still say the Dean. I like the Dean a lot. He's really funny in this. He goes all over the place physically, and then he has these, like, tender, sweet, very stupid moments with who he thinks is Jeff on his like, texting chain. So I'm going to go with the Dean. What about you, buddy?
Oh, mine's Britta. She shits her pants, so it's...
She does shit herself.
It's...
That's a true thing. She does.
It's... Yeah, Britta's really funny and spectacular, and I like a lot of the things you said about her in this episode. John, I need you to check the syllabus.
Yes.
Because I need you to identify your favorite bit of metatextual referencing and intertextual play. What do you got?
I think I'll go with the music video that Britta's in, where she thinks about all the good times in the 90s. I feel ya. Miss those times, Colin. What about you, buddy?
Small thing, could be wrong about this. When Chang says reshoots, John, this season makes several, at times subtle, but at other times overt, jokes at Marvel's expense. I'm convinced this is a Marvel joke when he says reshoots, because aren't they notorious for doing reshoots?
They are, man. Marvel's fallen. Marvel sucked shit now, dude.
Do they?
They were real bad for a while, then they got real bad. Oh well, it's a bummer, huh? Colin, I don't have best lines.
Okay.
I was doing the Gutenberg thing instead of doing the best lines. You do your best lines.
Do you want me to read them like RDJ? I could do my RDJ impression.
I don't think I would like nothing more than that, actually.
Well, I can't do it for all of them. I think there's one I can do. Oh, this message. This is me, Jeffrey. You are best friend. Very funny. Let's not forget the Brenda factor. There isn't a Brenda factor. She says she's doing better. Better than what? Her thyroid condition. Can you focus? Can Brenda? Probably now more so. Fantastic exchange between, I believe, Chang, the Dean, and Annie.
Annie,
You know, it's the darndest thing. I think Britta somehow crapped in my pants too. Better head home. That's a Jeff line. I'm sorry. Our strategy is to go after the dog. That's something Frankie says. I'm not psychic, Annie. That's an illusion caused by extreme preparedness. That's something that Frankie says. You sound a little like Jeff. Jeff said I sound like Abed. I wonder if Britta thinks I sound like Chang. I assume Chang thinks I sound like distant explosions and crying babies. You know he's unstable, right? And then Annie says, yep. Evil? I'll cop to silly. Some things are silly and evil, like candy cigarettes. And remember when Flava Flav had that reality TV show? I don't own a TV. Then the awkward pause. Hope points, and then Frankie says, hope points. Well, John, that is our conversation for Season 6, Episode 3 of Community, Basic Crisis Room Decorum. John, we have a Patreon page.
We have a Patreon page for like 10 more episodes, which would be, I don't know, 3 or 4 more Patreons, maybe? I don't know.
Depending on how sick we get, yeah.
It could be a fuck ton. Who knows? But for $3 a month, you get all the exclusive content. You could go over there right now, listen to like a fucking backlog of Patreon stuff that you haven't heard. Sometimes I'll hop on the Patreon and just go through some good stuff on there. For $7 a month, you become a producer of the show. You get exclusive content and a sticker. And every episode, we talk about how much we love you and appreciate you. Above that, you get a shirt, a sticker, producer. Above that, I guess, I don't know, whatever you want to do, really. I mean, I wouldn't come over right now. I got COVID, but in the future, we could go bowling, get a brewski. I don't know, cook up some fucking dogs on the grill, dude. I don't know, whatever you want to do, Colin. Let's thank our producers.
John, thank you to the following producers. Thank you to Katana, Crindy, Rachel, Kate, Daniel, Lars, Rob, Robin, Jeff, and Andrew. And John is right. It's the first link in the show notes. The second link is to our Threadless page if you want to buy Hop-Ons podcast merchandise. And John, if someone were so inclined as to rate and review the Hop-Ons podcast, what would you say? What would I say?
Well, it would be nice. I would say thank you. Ratings and reviews help the show get noticed. So when you search for community, you find us and not like again, a community development show or something about town planning. Who gives a fuck about that? Really,
we are on so many town planning lists, like the best of podcasts for like.
We're way up there. People love to hear us and then go make roads and shit. Anyway, ratings and reviews do help the show get noticed, and we will read your review here on the air. Normally when I'll sound better than this. I sound like I'm in a bit like in a tunnel right now, but I sound better most of the time. Anyway, Colin. That's it. What else is there?
And now we have some excellent listeners who have left comments on some of our episodes on Spotify. I was trying to get them here. All of them are positive, and I've actually published. I didn't know we had to do this. I thought they were just available anytime you left them. But if you leave a comment, I know to pay attention to it now. I will publish those, and that's I think that's it. I'll try to have them next time, and I'll read them quickly. But John, before we go, if there isn't anything else for the Hop-Ons podcast, my name is Colin Cox.
My name is John Phelps. Colin, I'll see you next time, buddy.
I'll see you next time, buddy.
Oh, that sounded like the Joker at the end.
You did it. Yeah.
Where they get a load of me?
Jack, you're number one. I got